So as you all know, Tomi Lahren is a right-wing political commentator who popularized the term snowflake. Now, what a snowflake is, according to her, is essentially a caricature of someone on the left who's too easily offended, who's overly politically correct, and who basically goes above and beyond to make sure that their feelings are protected at all costs. Now, she used to make fun of snowflakes pretty frequently. It was kind of what I think she was known for. So we're going to watch a Fox News clip where Tomi Lahren is brought on as a guest, and they discuss an individual who's a public official who decided to protest the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, as you'll see in this clip, it's become pretty clear that Tomi Lahren has become the snowflake, or at a minimum, the snowflake apologist that she once denounced.
A Democrat by the name of Melissa Schlag took a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance. That was in July 16th. Well, last night they had another meeting. What happened? Let's take you back to Haddam, Connecticut.
They were booing him. They got yelled at.
Did you see the girl in the back? She came around the table to see if her colleague was going to.
The cameras everywhere. They also had veterans in the audience just scream at her to stand up, telling their personal stories and how offended they are. It doesn't seem to bother her. She's against the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance in particular.
Well, in particular, she's against Donald Trump. We have some of the reaction from some of the people who were there last night. Let's play some of that.
What are you thinking when you kneel down to the sacred Pledge of Allegiance, that what those people died for gives you the right to do that and disrespect them? I think it was great.
I wholeheartedly respect your right to protest. If that's what you would like to do that on your own time.
Kneel and turn your back on that flag. You turned it on half of this town.
A lot of the folks in Haddam would like to see her resign. She has said she would not.
Yeah, she has no plans to seek a higher office, she says. She has received harassment and threats over her protest and calls for her resignation.
So is this about freedom or is this about disrespect? Tomi Lahren is a contributor, up early for us or out late, we're not sure. Tomi, what's your reaction to the reaction? The reaction I find heartening.
Well, the citizens of that town really said it better than I ever could, and you could see their emotion, you could see their patriotism, which is something that I personally love to see. I think what she's doing is disrespectful. I think also we have to remember that just because she has the right doesn't make her right. And it also doesn't mean that she's going to be shielded from criticism. She's choosing to do this. She's choosing to disrespect the flag. Clearly, veterans in the crowd feel that she's disrespecting them, and she deserves to be called out for it.
So, I mean, when you see that, it's clear that the right is being openly hypocritical. They're flaunting their hypocrisy now. I mean, listen to this quote from Brian Kilmeade. He said, "They also had veterans in the audience just scream at her and stand up telling her their personal stories and how offended they are. It doesn't seem to bother her. She's against the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance in particular." Now, when you hear that quote, does that not sound like a prototypical snowflake that Tomi Lahren would denounce? I mean, if you remove this particular issue from the context and you apply someone being offended to any other issue, she would make fun of them and call them a snowflake. But in this instance, since in an issue that she's personally offended by, well, she didn't tell Brian Kilmeade that they were just being snowflakes or that he was being a snowflake. No. She actually decided to agree with that sentiment. She said, "I think what she's doing," meaning the public official, "is disrespectful," and she said that since veterans felt disrespected, she deserved to be called out for it. Now, when liberals call out right-wingers, we're told that we're being too politically correct and oversensitive. But when they call out left-wingers for doing something that's politically incorrect, well, they're justified in doing that. It's a complete double standard, and they don't even care how hypocritical they look. Now, when I see people getting offended by her kneeling during the Pledge of Allegiance, my thoughts are, who gives a shit? Who cares? That doesn't affect me at all. It's symbolic. It's a protest. And one individual even said, well, look, if you want to protest, do that at home. But that defeats the point of the protest. The point of protesting is to get your message across. And the reason why people tend to protest during the Pledge of Allegiance is because patriotism is a relatively touchy subject, especially for conservatives, and it's probably going to be a time when they're paying attention. Hence the reason why people tend to protest during the Pledge of Allegiance. But look, in this next clip that I'm going to show you, we kind of get to the crux of their outrage, and they ultimately chalk her protest up to a disrespect for veterans. And as I'm going to explain afterwards, what they're trying to do is change the conversation. So it's not about protest, and it's about her hating veterans or disrespecting veterans.
It's hard really to watch this, in my personal opinion. We've been watching all of the remains that are in caskets coming home to America. Families have been without their loved ones. They made the ultimate sacrifice. We had a guy on the show the other day who said he didn't see his dad after he was 4 years old because he was missing in action. And dad never came home. Doesn't have answers. So, I mean, when you hear these stories and then you see people kneeling for the flag, knowing what our servicemen and women have done for this country, I mean, to me, it's just so sad.
It's sad and it's really disheartening. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because we have so many Americans that have fought and died for this country. And it just shows that there are some, usually on the Democratic side of the aisle, that their disdain for this president is greater than their love for this country. And I think we need to remember that whatever their issue is with this president, whatever their issue is with this administration or Republicans or Trump supporters, it shouldn't trump, if you will, their love of this country and their respect for those who have fought and died for this country. Why that has become something the Democrats have embraced is beyond me. I don't understand it. Why is patriotism not something that all Americans believe in? You can dislike this president and his administration. You can also use the other 23 hours and 58 minutes in the day to show that disdain for this president and this administration. You don't have to use the anthem. You don't have to use the Pledge of Allegiance.
So that to me was so disingenuous, because clearly she was creating a straw man of her opponent's argument. She didn't care to figure out why this individual was actually protesting during the pledge. She just applied what she thought the protest was about, and she chalked it up to her disrespecting the troops. And she brought up the veterans that died, and she gave numerous examples of this. But what she was doing here was trying to change the conversation. Instead of making this about a protest of American policy, what she wanted to do was frame this as a protest specifically of the troops themselves, which is really the ultimate straw man. Now, that isn't what she said explicitly, but that was the underlying implication. That's the point that she was trying to get across, and the point that was probably well received by Fox News' viewers. And here's something that may just blow their minds over at Fox News. What if I told you that you can protest and kneel during the Pledge of Allegiance because you actually support troops? I know, shocker, right? What if your protest during the Pledge of Allegiance is specifically due to your aversion to war and U.S. imperialism, and you don't agree that we should keep sending American troops overseas to die in never-ending unnecessary wars for no good reason whatsoever? What if she was protesting in favor of the troops? That would be incredibly justifiable. And think about this. If you believe our veterans fought and died for our freedom, wouldn't the next logical assumption be that that freedom is also extended to our right to protest the flag? I mean, the logic doesn't even make sense by their own standards. It wouldn't make sense for a veteran to say, look, I went overseas, I fought for your freedom, but that freedom ends at your right to protest the flag. That's a freedom that I didn't fight for. I mean, their argument doesn't make sense. They don't have an argument, which is why they have to strawman, and they have to try to tug on the heartstrings of their viewers in order to cultivate sympathy for their bullshit anti-freedom of speech position. And again, Tomi Lahren here, she implied, if they're going to protest the president, why do it during the anthem or the pledge? Because that's when people are paying attention. What's the point of doing a protest if nobody's going to be looking? The whole point of protest is to draw attention to a particular political issue. So why on earth would you do it at a time that's less likely to be viewed by other individuals? If you truly want people to hear your message, or you want to have any sort of impact whatsoever, then you need to do it at a time when it's going to be most visible. And this this clip is evidence for that argument. So these are individuals who are completely hypocritical. They're more than willing to call out the left being too politically correct and overly sensitive, but when they do it, it's perfectly okay. If we do it, we're snowflakes, we're too politically correct. If they do it, they're just being respectful to the flag and veterans. It's a complete double standard, and people like Tomi Lahren should at least attempt to be at least a little bit more consistent with regard to her position on sensitivity and political correctness, especially if she had this meteoric rise in politics because she made a name for herself making fun of people who are too politically correct and sensitive. But I mean, we live in a world where right-wingers can be as openly hypocritical as they want to, and that's that.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.